Hello everybody, welcome to the I Am IT Geek YouTube channel. My name is Shabaz, and as ever, I am the IT Geek. Welcome to what I believe is episode 7 of the SC300 exam study guide YouTube series that I'm doing. We've done some really interesting topics at the moment. The last few episodes we looked at external collaboration, and now moving forward, we're going to be looking for to finish off module 1. The next 4 episodes are going to be all around hybrid identity. Before we get started on that, it'd be remiss of me not to say hello and introduce my good friend, Dwayne Natwick. Hi, Dwayne.
Hey, Shabaz. How are you doing today?
I am really good. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Good. Good to see you as ever. This Whirlwind series getting loads of support from the community. So, from myself, thank you. And I'm sure, Dwayne, you'll want to do the same. It's been really good, and we appreciate everybody's ongoing support. What I will do is I will get cracking straight onto the content. So let's get the theory done so you can get to all the interesting stuff that Dwayne's going to show us.
This is going to be a fun one. I love this section of identity and access management.
Yeah, the hybrid element as well is quite interesting. A couple more in-depth demos. So we are coming towards the end of Module 1, the last 4 episodes. Obviously, we're looking at still implementing identities in Azure AD, which is what Module 1 is. So just a quick overview of what we're going to cover in this particular episode. This is part 1 of the implementing and managing hybrid identity. We do have 4 parts of this, a lot to cover. So we're going to cover off implementing and managing Azure AD Connect specifically. We'll look at implementing and managing Azure Cloud Connect Sync. And then we'll finish off with a demo of installing and configuring Azure AD Connect. And that's why Dwayne will take over. So let's look at that first bit for, implementing and managing Azure AD Connect. So there's obviously quite a few elements and features to Azure AD Connect. The first one is that synchronization. Okay, so Azure AD Connect is responsible for creating users, groups, and other objects, then making sure identity information for your on-premises users and groups is matching the cloud. Okay, so that's where that synchronization piece comes in, matching different types of matches. You can have a soft match or a hard match. This synchronization also includes password hashes as well, so we'll be getting into that in a bit more detail. So password hash sync is also another feature of the Azure AD Connect. So this is a sign-in method that synchronizes a hash of the user's on-premises AD password with Azure AD. Okay. So as I mentioned, there are different type of synchronization methods as well. One of them is password hash sync. The other one is pass-through authentication. Pass-through authentication is a sign-in method that allows authentication from the on-premises infrastructure. Okay, so you use that same password as on-premises during the cloud, but it doesn't require any sort of extra infrastructure for that federation. But then we do have federation as part of Azure AD Connect as well. Okay, so federation is an optional part of Azure AD Connect and can be used to configure sort of hybrid, really hybrid environments with your on-premises infrastructure and your Azure infrastructure. Also provides an ADFS, Azure Active Directory Federation Services Management capabilities, such as certificate renewals and more of those ADFS sort of server deployments. Okay.
Key use case and key exam is if you're using an external multi-factor authentication provider, such as like Okta, you need to use this form of synchronization.
Yeah, exactly. And then we have health monitoring. So Azure AD Connect Health provides robust monitoring as well. Now, password hash sync, pass-through authentication, federation, health monitoring, we are going to be looking at in a lot more detail in this within these 4 episodes that we've got. So, quick overview of what they are. They're part of Azure AD Connect, but we'll be delving into much more detail of all 4 of those. So, don't worry about that. So, again, we've got that sort of, a bit of a diagram to show how does Azure AD Connect work. So we've got our on-premises Active Directory. Again, it can be a Windows VM. It could be a VM within Azure, but you've got that Active Directory. And we have Azure AD. You essentially configure that Azure AD Connect so they can talk to each other. And then we have our user with his multiple devices, and they sign on using the same UPN. So it's the same UPN that's synchronized between Active Directory on premises and Azure AD. Okay, and you can use that on your multiple devices. And that in turn then gives you access to those cloud apps be it Office apps or any SaaS apps that might be hosted within the cloud. So just a couple of recommendations when using password hash sync specifically. So password hash sync is the simplest way to authenticate from on-premises directory objects to Azure AD. Users can use the same username and password and they use on-premises without having to deploy any sort of infrastructure. Okay, so it's probably the quickest and easiest thing to implement. You can implement HR, it implements HR and DR, so high availability, and the sort of disaster recovery as well. So the other a good feature, a good positive about password hash sync, it has that outage survival as well. So the consequences of an on-premises outage due to a cyber attack, for example, or less in the UK, I suppose, but it could be a disaster in another country, can substantially hurt reputation, brand damage, and also paralyze your organization, especially if you're unable to deal with that attack. Recently, many organizations were victims of malware attacks, including that targeted ransomware. So password hash sync helps against that sort of outage survival. It also has that extra protection, so it protects that identity. So one of the best ways to protect users in the cloud, especially with Azure AD, is that Azure Identity Protection with Azure AD Premium 2. And Microsoft continually scans the internet for users' passwords and usernames and lists all those bad actors that might be sold on the market. So password hash sync adds that extra protection layer into your identity as well. What I want to touch on now are some different topologies with Azure AD Connect. Okay, so it's not just one topology, there are different ways you can implement it. The most common is single on-premises forest with one or multiple domains. So a single Azure AD tenancy as well. So for Azure AD authentication, password hash synchronization is used. The express installation of Azure AD Connect supports only this topology. So that's single forest to single Azure AD. Another topology we have is multiple forest with a single Azure AD. So on the left we have our multiple forest and we have our single Azure AD tenancy there. So many organizations have environments with multiple on-premises domains. Dwayne mentioned, the company he works with has child domains and parent domains. So similar, we can have multiple domains and you can sync those with Azure AD. When you do have multiple forests, or all forests must be reachable by a single Azure AD Connect sync server. So there needs to be that network connectivity. There needs to be able to connect into all those to do that sync. Okay. Another topology is multiple forests with a single sync server. Okay, so we have our multiple forests. We have our Azure AD. But then in between, we actually have a single sync server. Okay. In this environment, all on-premises forests are treated as separate entities. So no user is present in any other forest, and each forest has its own exchange organization and their own sort of gal sync between the forests. This topology might be the situation after a merger acquisition, so similar to what Dwayne mentioned earlier. Then moving on from this, another topology. Sorry, I went the wrong way, didn't I? Okay, sorry. 3, 2, 1. So moving on from this multiple forest single sync server, we have what is then called multiple forest full mesh. Okay, so in here we have a full mesh topology. It allows users and resources to be located in any forest. Commonly, there are two-way trust between the forests as well. If Exchange is present in more than one forest, there might be, which is obviously optional, an on-premises gal sync solution as well. Okay, so every user is then represented as a contact in the other forest. Okay, so they've got some sort of link to each forest. So another topology is a multiple forest and account resource forest. So in account resource forest topology, you have one or more account forests with an active user accounts. You also have one or more resource forests with disabled accounts. In this scenario, one or more resource forests trust all account forests. Okay, so there's a trust between them. The resource voice typically has an extended Active Directory schema with Exchange or what used to be Link, might be Skype for Business now. All Exchange and Skype users or Link users, along with the shared services, are located in this forest. Users have a disabled user account in this forest, and the mailbox is linked to the account forest. Okay. So one of the final sort of topologies I want to talk about is a staging server. Okay. So this is where Azure AD Connect supports installing a second server in staging mode. So we have our first sync server and we have our staging server. Okay. A server in this mode reads data from all connected directories but does not write anything to the connected directories. So it's literally there for read-only purposes. Uses a normal synchronization cycle and therefore has an updated copy of the identity data. This is probably something you'd use more in a disaster recovery, if you want to try and protect against disaster recovery for your Azure AD Connect services. Then we have multiple Azure AD tenancies. So this topology is implemented in the following cases. So Azure AD Connect can synchronize with same users, groups, and contacts from a single Active Directory to multiple Azure AD tenants. These tenants can be different Azure environments, such as Azure China environment, Azure government environment, and so on. But they could also be in the same Azure environment, such as two tenants that are both in Azure Commercial. The same resource anchor can be used for a single object in separate tenants, but not for multiple objects in the same tenant. Okay. You'll need to deploy an Azure AD Connect server for every Azure AD tenant you want to synchronize to. One Azure AD Connect server cannot synchronize with more than one Azure AD tenant. Okay, so you can see the relationship there is one sync server to one Azure AD tenancy. So now we've seen some of the topologies. Just want to move on to some common sort of component factors with Azure AD Connect. First one is called connector spaces, or CS. So this is objects from each connected directory, or CD. The actual directories are staged here first before can be processed by the provisioning engine. Okay, Azure AD has its own CS or connector space, and each forest you can connect to will have its own connector space as well. Next is what's known as Metaverse MV. We're not talking about Facebook or that bloody social media metaverse lark. Objects that need to be synced are created here based on a sync rule. Objects must exist in the metaverse before they can be populated objects and attributes in other connected directories. There is only one metaverse. A bit like the Highlander, there can only be one. It's a Highlander joke for those Highlander film fans. Next, we have sync rules. So they decide which objects will be created or connected to objects in your MV, in your metaverse. The sync rules also decide which attribute values will be copied or transformed to and from the other directories. Finally, we have run profiles. So these are bundles. The bundle of the processes that steps of copying data and objects and their attribute values according to the sync rules between the staging areas and the connected directories. So let's have a look at Azure AD Cloud Sync. So support for synchronizing to an Azure AD tenant from multiple forests disconnected from Azure AD Connect. Let me do that again. My notes. 3, 2, 1. Let's now talk a little bit about Azure AD Connect Sync. Okay. So there is sync support. So support for synchronizing to an Azure AD tenant from a multi-forest disconnected Active Directory forest environment. Common scenarios include mergers and acquisitions, as Dwayne mentioned earlier. Also, Azure AD Cloud Sync has a simplified installation. It's with lightweight provisioning agents as well. So these agents act as like a bridge from Active Directory to Azure AD. There are you can have multiple provision agents. They can be used for, as we mentioned, high availability deployments or sort of DR situations. And this is when critical for organizations who rely heavily on that password hash sync. And then we have large group support as well. So with up to 50,000 members. It's recommended that you use only the OU scoping filter when synchronizing large groups. So Dwayne, my throat's starting to hurt, mate, so I'm going to hand over to you to go through and do the demo, if that's all right.
Tenant, you can scroll down and find Azure AD Connect in here, and download Azure AD Connect. I'm going to do that actually within a virtual that I created in here. If you're looking to do this and to test yourself, there is a site, Microsoft Cloud Workshops, where there's a hybrid identity workshop, and you can utilize this to deploy an actual DC environment, a domain controller within your environment. That's what I've done here, just to kind of work with it and show it here. I'm in my portal on this domain controller, and I'm going to go into Azure Active Directory, go to Azure AD Connect within here, and let me blow this up a little bit here, everybody, so they can see. And then you just go and download, go to the download location, download Azure Active Directory Connect. You can see the MSI file is downloading here in the corner, and we will open and we will run Azure AD Connect. So I can minimize my browser here, and you can see I'm on my domain controller, and Azure AD Connect has already installed. It's very quick, very easy. You agree to the light agreement, select continue. Now here's a couple of things to take into account, and we'll note this as we go through and we look at the other options here in some of the other demos. If we use express settings, you can see that the express settings use the password hash synchronization. So if you want to use password hash synchronization, you have that single forest and single Azure AD tenant set up within your environment. You can use these express settings. If not, you need to use the customized settings. And so you can see here, if we're going to use an existing SQL server, we have multiple organizational units we want to and forests that we want to bring into Azure Active Directory. We need to use these other components. Something else around the SQL Server, I believe, utilizing one of the things that takes place when you use the express settings and you set up Azure AD Connect is it puts a version of SQL Server Express on the domain controller. If you don't want to put that kind of pressure on your domain controller of running SQL Server Express, you can use an existing SQL Server and bring that in. I believe if it's Shabaz, help me out here. Is it 100,000? Is it 100,000 directory users that is the threshold, or is it higher than that for having to use?
100,000 sounds about right. I think it is 100,000.
Yeah. So if you have a very large environment, you can't use that SQL Server Express. You've got to use the internal SQL Server. So keep that in mind. For this demo, just because we'll get into some of the more customized settings in the next modules. We'll just use the express settings here just to show how quick and easy this is, and just really what roles you need to kind of have to go ahead and do this. And you can see this is Azure AD. You can see the global administrator or the hybrid identity administrator credentials are the roles that you need to have and to install Azure AD Connect.
I just quickly checked, Dwayne. It is 100,000 users. I just checked it.
Thank you very much. Yeah. I remembered my information there off the top of my head. The hybrid identity administrator. So if you're looking at principles of least privilege, you should have a hybrid and having proper roles and proper separation of these within your Azure AD environment. You should have, and you're using Azure AD, you should have a hybrid identity administrator identified and somebody with that role rather than using a global administrator. And let's log in here to my Azure AD account first. And again, I'm using my global administrator. Do as I say, not as I do, and use hybrid administrator. There we go. And it's going to ask me to sign into my account. And it's just taking me through the process again here.
Everybody close your eyes so you don't see his password. Look away.
Yep, look away. I got MF, so it's gonna make me approve it anyway. So protect me from hacking. All right. So here we go. And there we go. We've got our username here. And there we go. So this is really all, we're setting up our UPN and we're setting up our match because this domain, it doesn't match my existing domain. If you're doing on your own environment, they're going to match each other. So, but we're gonna just select to continue without matching the UPN suffixes at this time. You're gonna, in your forest and your Azure AD tenant, you should be utilizing the same domain. So we're going to go through, and here we go. We're about to start the synchronization process. It's going to configure and going to do all the installation. Here we're setting up the database. We're setting up the SQL Express. As stated, this is password hash based synchronization. So any users that are within this domain controller are going to synchronize up once this installation is completed, and they are going to then be in the Azure AD tenant. They can utilize then to log into cloud resources, their domain controller, their Windows Active Directory credentials to log in. Now, I don't think we mentioned this in the presentation. Their passwords are not being synchronized up to Azure Active Directory. The passwords themselves stay on the Windows Active Directory, but a hash of the password, an encrypted version of that, goes up into to Azure AD. So there's that level of security and protection then in the cloud of your passwords. So that's more or less it for this demo. Like I said, this is going to configure, it's going to complete, and then the synchronization is going to start taking place, which we'll talk about synchronization and synchronization health in another module. So I think we're all right to move on from our demo.
No, thanks again, Dwayne, for that really good demo. So I think in one of the next couple of sessions or record videos, we are going to be going more detail into password hash sync. That's where we'll explain. I think we touched on it. I mentioned the password hash synchronizes the hash of it, but we'll actually go into more detail about password hash. And I think we've got, again, some more really good demos lined up for the next 3 episodes regarding hybrid. So again, thank you very much. Thank you everybody for your ongoing support. Please do subscribe if you're not already. Keep liking, keep commenting. And we hope this helps pass your exam. All our socials are in the description. A link to the GitHub where all the labs are as well, and also a link to Dwayne's SC300 book. So please buy that, follow that as we're going along. Dwayne, always a pleasure. Thank you everybody for watching, and until next time, thank you and goodbye.
Thanks everybody.